It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
All right, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. We are coming to you once again today from Vector Global Logistics, a company that's providing world-class logistics services, all while deeply investing into the communities that they serve. Based in Atlanta, but with an international reach, the company is on the move. You can learn more at vectorgl.com. On a quick programming note, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, wherever else you find your podcast. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Supply Chain Now Radio is also brought to you by a variety of sponsors, including the Effective Syndicate, Apex Atlanta, Verison, SupplyChainRealEstate.com, and several other leading organizations. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about our valuable sponsors. Okay, so let's welcome in our co-host today, Chris Barnes, co-host here on Supply Chain Now Radio and executive director with Apex Atlanta. Chris, how you doing?
Doing well, Scott. Thank you.
Great to have you back. We enjoyed the webinar we did last week.
It was the best.
It was well. We got a lot of great feedback on WMS, which of course is a hot topic. It's what's powering the e-commerce world these days, it seems like, and really enjoyed your perspective there. And Greg White, co-host, Supply Chain Now Radio, and serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Greg, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good to have both of y'all back from your world travels. And speaking of world travels, let's welcome in our featured guest today, Mike Wasson, Chief Operations Officer with Tosca. Mike, how you doing?
Doing very well, thank you.
We're great to have you. I know you had some travel in the front end, but you're here in a beautiful Atlanta morning.
10 on the Mellish meter.
Is it really?
Yep.
It is.
I believe it.
That's right.
It was nice and cool this morning, and we're all looking forward to a great football field weekend, right? Although you got some other things on your calendar, which I know you're looking forward to. But regardless, we're glad you're here today at Supply Chain Now Radio, where you're going to be sharing, leadership best practices, supply chain management insights, and some really cool tips on how to become an employer of choice. So looking forward to that, Mike. Before we do that, though, ding, 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 ding. So we're going to talk about some of the top things to know in Supply Chain Now. That was supposed to be a like an old school news.
This just in.
Yeah. So I gotta work on that again. So Chris and Greg.
Your board has sound effects. You can use them.
So
they're already paid for it.
Yeah. Right.
That's why we paid for them.
That's right.
So what we like to start most of our shows is some things to keep on your radar from the world of end-to-end supply chain. So, Chris, what's been on your radar here lately?
Well, I think the what's going to happen on Monday is the tariffs. I think that should be on everybody's radars. But supply chain or not, if you pay taxes or you buy anything, that's gonna impact your budgets. I think it'll be a little bit delayed effect. It doesn't happen overnight like fuel prices, but things are going into effect. I'm looking at 122-page harmonized tariff schedule.
All at once.
A list all at once. It's very demanding. It's a very small. I shrank it to my screen so I can see it. It says page 1. No, but things are going on there. So if you're looking to buy a grand piano, that's going to be hit with a 10% tariff.
No way.
Yeah. So get those while you can. The other one is the artillery. So if you're in the artillery market for weapons, make sure you get those guns, howitzers, those types of things. So, which I always thought interesting. I'm not sure why we would buy that type of thing from a foreign country, but anyway, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going into effect. So prices will go up.
And are these predominantly China tariffs or elsewhere?
Yes. Yeah, that's it's across. It's across the board with HTS, but they're targeting specifically the primary source of these things.
Wow. Well, we've talked about tariffs a lot.
Sure.
Chris, that whenever we have Will Haraway on the show, that's his chosen topic. Music and tariffs. That's what he wants to talk about. So we do talk about it a lot, and I think one of the assertions we have always made is that corporations don't pay taxes and they don't pay tariffs, right? Consumers do. So these these things add up, right? And they will, as much as many companies are pledging not to allow it to impact their prices. Walmart came out some weeks ago and said they're going to hold off as long as they can. But boy, it really feels like it's adding up, doesn't it? I mean,
well, even the cost aside, just the amount of additional complexity that it adds to supply chain practitioners' lives, right? Because
no doubt,
we've got to figure out how to protect the bottom line with more and more constraints, right? So, it's a no-win situation, and and it's an apolitical topic. If you're in supply chain, you know what's coming Monday. So, Chris, thanks for pointing that out, because it is going to make, for many folks, it's going to make life more difficult. And for many consumers, it's going to make things more expensive.
Well, and it's already made it difficult for supply chain professionals. They've been provisioning for this since the threats came.
Good point.
Right? And then when the first round of tariffs kicked in, I think a lot of people saw the writing on the wall. Yep. And then when the Chinese retaliated in the way that they did, I think it was pretty easy to predict what was going to happen. I think companies started rerouting goods or hoarding.
Right? Yeah, if you listen to anything first half of the year we talked about, I kept saying warehouse capacity is at a max in North America, and that was because people were importing in advance of the tariffs.
Yep.
Well, and then the other thing that we've talked about also earlier in the year, Chris and Greg, is the lack of when you think about pricing and pricing parts. I used to be metal stamping. We'd price parts and we'd tie those parts a lot of times to the steel index, right? If it goes up, if it goes down. But we've met with plenty of manufacturers over the last 12 months that didn't have any clarity on their pricing strategy, because they weren't sure when the tariffs were going to stick and when they weren't, because they obviously those time frames have changed a good bit. So they were communicating one thing to customers, and then just a month later to go back and communicate something else. So no one wins with lack of clarity and with adding more complexity. So, we'll see how it all plays out. But it's a tough thing to manage.
And it's interesting. Although it is apolitical, it is still political, because if you look at the actual regulations without watching television and having them tell you what's going on, you'll notice that certain products have been excluded. That kind of target specific markets.
They've been given a waiver. Right?
Yes, cell phones, laptop computers, video game consoles, certain toys. Computer monitors, and items of footwear. So you tell me where the lobbyists are.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a tough topic, man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of every one of those items you quoted has almost zero margin for the retailer. I mean, they are lost leader type items, and there's not much room in them.
Yeah.
Right. No one could absorb the additional cost of a tariff on those kind of items.
Well, we were just talking. I mean, the last item you mentioned there was footwear. We were just talking a couple months ago, I think, on a show we were on, Chris, where unfortunately the American footwear manufacturing scene has really seen some tough times over the last 20 years, and I cannot remember the exact numbers, but for it was the margin difference for footwear that's made in overseas and versus what it's sold for compared to what American manufacturers had to deal with. I mean, it's
substantial.
Oh, it's just it's mind blowing. And if you think it's big, it's 3 times that. But anyway, plenty of folks out there fighting a good fight, and there's some great American companies that are still winning. New Balance and a few others, but. Let's shift gears, because I know we want to talk also. What's a timely topic is the weather, right?
Yeah. So as if we didn't have enough supply chain disruptions to plan and operate around, right? When this airs, it'll be history. But right now, it's news. Hurricane Durian is approaching Florida, right? Has already substantially impacted the Virgin Islands and skimmed the northeast corner of Puerto Rico. It will go over the top of the Bahamas, and it looks like hit Florida somewhere around Fort Myers, Melbourne, some area like that. It's a very slow-moving storm, so it's going to create issues even after it lands, and it's supposed to be one of the most substantial storms to hit Florida in many, many years. So look, there are all sorts of supply chain disruptions already occurring. So just on the way in here, I heard that flights to Florida are packed full because people are going down there to batten down the hatches. right? Or to retrieve, goods, cars, boats, whatever that they want to save from damage down there. And of course, outbound. Ironically, I have a cousin who is training to be a pilot in Vero Beach, sunny and beautiful, boring Vero Beach. And he had to get a commercial ticket home.
Wow.
Because they have to move all of the aircraft from flight safety inland or to Dallas or wherever their other facilities are to keep them safe from the storm. So that's an issue. And additionally, retailers and support organizations are trying to position goods to be able to immediately help people recover and also prepare.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I think many people have seen plywood going up on people's windows. Right. So you've got to be able to predict that.
So on that note, we should give a big shout out to Kathy Fulton, which has been on the show a couple of times. Big fans of Allen Aid. They're doing outstanding work leveraging corporate supply chain infrastructure and expertise and know-how to address these natural disasters. So you can check them out if you're interested. They're a nonprofit that do exceptional work. Allen, ALAN, aid.org if you're interested in supporting some of those efforts.
They're already actually producing warnings and have been for a few days to help people to help people know how and when and where to get to. And we will undoubtedly experience that, as we almost always do in Atlanta. People come inland to Macon and Atlanta. To wait out the storm. So
and I think too the Central Florida, Southern Georgia, big agricultural community is going to be, decimated. I think again as we're nearing harvest. So they've got crops in the field that they're going to be trying to get harvested and get out of the impacted area. It's going to be tough on the farmers.
Yeah, I think I think the last storm, and you have to forgive me the name, but they called it a generational storm, meaning that it wiped out the means of production for an entire generation for certain crops.
For I think pecans, blueberries, right, where it decimated the root structure.
It actually took the plants away.
Well, prayers and best wishes for sure, and we'll see how that plays out. But if you want to help, again, AllenAid.org is there. They're doing great work. They are boots on the ground, and they can use all the support along with the people down there that they can get.
Well, and it creates, Chris made the point in the pre-show that it creates a planning issue as well, right? I mean, one more disruption. Undoubtedly, the Port of Savannah, over which the storm is supposed to go, and Charleston, the two most utilized ports on the East Coast these days, right? So
seems like it.
They'll undoubtedly shut down, and those ships will have to circle at sea until they can come in. So it's a really interesting situation. It's something that here in the Southeast we deal with pretty frequently, and it's something, by the way, that companies are starting to figure out how to provision for in advance. And I think companies and the government and the aid agencies are much, much better at it than they used to be.
Agreed. So changing gears before we dive into Mike, so Malcolm, leader of our research team here at Supply Chain Now Radio, sent me a quick note as you were making your points, and he said, Scott, get your stinking facts right. And he sent me a NPR link to the shoe manufacturing scene. And this is what we referenced a couple months ago, so thank you for that, Malcolm. So 99% of the shoes sold in the U.S. these days are imported, many from China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And if you look at this NPR article, and I'll quote here, for a shoe factory job paying $12 an hour, the actual cost of shoemaking, when adding benefits, it grows to $16 an hour compared with about $3 an hour in China, which Mike Jeppesen, head of global operations at Wolverine Worldwide, was quoted saying that. And Wolverine Worldwide, which is easy for you to say, owns brands like Morel, Sperry, and Keds. And if you think that, and he goes on to say that cost quadruples after wholesale and retail markups. So that balloons into a $50 price difference between a pair made in the U.S. versus in China. So, and we wonder why, we've lost so much footwear manufacturing, amongst other things.
It's been a long time that a lot of shoes have been made in the States. That's I mean, remember the good old days when they were made in Brazil when I was a kid. Right. I mean, that it has been so long If you think about how the cost structures have changed, it's now too expensive to make, not only to make shoes in the States, but to make them in South America, and instead they're being made in the Far East.
So since 1990, according to the article again from NPR, since 1990, over 80% of the U.S. shoe manufacturing jobs have evaporated.
Yeah.
So, but
that's three uppers, three bits of uplifting news to start the show. Come on.
So we have got lots of good news, like we have on each show, and it's in the form of Mike Wasson, COO with Tosca. So, Mike, good morning again.
Good morning. I've never been
you can't top that.
As good. Well, I can top that actually, because as Chris was talking about upcoming events and significant impact to our economy on Monday, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't remind folks that Monday is also Labor Day, right?
Yep.
And Labor Day celebrating the contribution that the workers have made to the economy and made the United States the strongest, best economy in the world. So we ought to take a moment to recognize that while we're talking about all this bad news, remember to thank the folks that make your shoes
Get it
still
done.
in the United States.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't be where we are without the workers, and we certainly wouldn't have the opportunity to build upon that we do today without the folks that toiled for us in the past.
Yeah, no doubt.
Amen. Absolutely. So we're going to talk more about Tosca. Tosca is an intriguing company, changing industry by changing the way companies move perishables. As I think we've all coined it, a couple of us here at least, incredibly innovative supply chain super competitor. So we're going to learn more about Tosca in a minute, but Mike, I want to start with more about you and your background. So where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in the Chicagoland area, and it's funny when people ask me like, "Where's home?" It's a little tough. I grew up in Chicago, moved away when I was, I guess, in 8th grade. And then moved to Ohio, where my family still is, then went back to Chicago for college, worked there for a few years, then moved, and now, next week my wife and I celebrate our 23rd wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And,
wow.
and we are in our 11th house now.
Oh, wow.
So even my daughter has lived in four different states. So it's a little hard to kind of tie down to where you're from, because we have had the privilege of living in a lot of great cities and
the real estate industry loves the Wasson household.
Yes.
The relocation real estate folks really like us. Yep.
So we'll talk about your college experience here in a second, but early on, I love asking. I'm always curious about early role models or early leadership lessons learned. What do you think about that and what it means in your journey? Anything stick out?
Well, if I answer that question, should I ever be compelled to go interview for another job, I'm not going to be able to use this example. Okay. Which I'm not, by the way. I love what we're doing. But one of my make a note of that.
Yes. Say that twice.
One of my what I think was sort of a pivotal moment in my young leadership career. I was working for a trucking company, and on my third day of a what I think was a world-class 10-week, very structured leadership training program. On the third day, my supervisor came in and threw a clipboard at me and said, "Get out on the dock. One of the other guys called in sick. You need to be out there." And I can't quote him exactly because there were some other words in there, but
get your hind end.
So I got all fired up, and I was ready to go supervise this group of 35 or so Teamsters, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go be a supervisor. And I got out there, and I went up to the guy that was my most immediate direct report, and I was going to tell him how to get things done. And he put his arm around me, and he was a little guy, so he reached up, put his arm around me, and said, "What's your name again?" I said, "Mike. I'm your supervisor." He goes, "Look, Mike, got it. I understand. I appreciate that, but why don't you go back in the office, get yourself a cup of coffee? I'll take care of things." I said, "But no, I'm your supervisor. I gotta supervise." He goes, "Look, I've been doing this 35 years. Here's what I need from you, right? I need you to tell me when the trailers need to leave to be on time. I need you to tell me what we have coming. so I can plan the capacity and make sure we've got room on the trucks. I need you to tell me, just anything weird like that. Otherwise, I got this. I 35 years, 3 days, right? Let me do what I'm good at. You do what you're good at, and you focus on the planning part of it, and I'll take care of it. And I was like, that makes a great point. So while I didn't go sit in the office and drink coffee, I did focus my time and energy on the things where I could add value. I could add value by having a better plan and longer lead time, better visibility to the loads coming and what time we needed to cut trailers to get them out of town and make on-time service to the customer. And he could focus on loading the trucks efficiently and making sure the cube was fully utilized and making sure that the priority shipments were on the trailers and things like that. And I learned a really, really valuable lesson there about focusing on the things where you can add the greatest value and not overstepping, staying within your lane and letting the other folks that are really good at what they do be really good at what they do. So now I can't ever go interview for another job again because that's one of my stories.
You're one of your go-tos, arrows in the quiver.
That is management, though, isn't it? I mean, sometimes it is removing roadblocks. It's not directing necessarily.
Taking away the constraints that might prevent them from being the best they can be.
Yeah.
So you talked about how you were kind of grew up in the Chicagoland area, moved to Ohio, and then went back to Chicago for your formal education, your college experience. Tell us about that. Where'd you go?
So I went to a very small school, Lewis University, which very, very few folks have heard of outside of the Chicago area, but a great school. It was the right thing for me at the time.
How big?
So it was largely commuters from Chicago, maybe 3,500 students, something like that, and it's grown significantly. It's actually transitioned into a really good school that's regionally recognized. A lot more on campus versus commuter students now than there used to be. But yeah, no football team, so I couldn't root for a football team. Had a pretty good baseball team and a pretty good basketball team at the time. But anyway, went to school there. Great school, great program, great education, and then really, I would say my continuing education beyond that has been through APEX, through APEX certification and the body of knowledge that they have to offer, learning more about supply chain and just a lot of on the job working with great leaders and managers through my career.
So although no football team at Lewis University, they do have athletics. Chris or Greg, do y'all know what their mascot is?
I know who would know, but
they share the mascot with Dayton, I believe.
The Flyers.
Yeah, the Flyers.
That's right. That's exactly right. Founded, I can't remember the year, but like Scott's looking at the website, maybe like 1924 or something like that, as an aviation college. And then grew and still has a tremendous aviation school there.
Wow. What did you get your degree in?
So interestingly, my degree is in marketing, and it's because when I went to school, there was no supply chain was not a thing yet. Even operations management was not really, in most schools, it was not a recognized program. Things like that were either part of business administration or marketing programs, and I chose marketing because I like to understand how people think about things. And actually, one of my favorite degrees today, where I try to recruit from, is a program called Industrial Psychology, which is really focused on how people think in the workplace, helping connect the work that people do to their emotions and their the things that they want to or things that they feel are important. So marketing at the time was the right one for me.
Well, and now you're like a dangerous weapon. I mean, you've got marketing. I mean, we all know how important marketing is in the supply chain industry these days. I mean, there's been a huge amount of dollars coming in, and a lot of companies are looking for marketing chops. And then, of course, to marry that side with your operational years of experience and your certifications and APEX involvement. I mean, really, that's kind of getting your best of both worlds. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit, because I do want to speaking of marketing, I do want to learn a lot more about Tosca. We have been here in the Atlanta area. We've been fortunate to rub elbows with the Tosca team, going back 4 or 5 years at least. Been great supporters of the Apex Atlanta chapter, Chris, and have hosted some of our events and Company of the Year here recently. So y'all have been building quite a story and growing left and right. But at the core, what does Tosca do?
So we are a reusable packaging company at our core. What we do, we believe we change the game when it comes to perishable food packaging. Folks today, I think that there's a lot of interest around taking single-use packaging out of the ecosystem, taking plastic waste out of the ecosystem. So our company provides reusable packaging. It is plastic packaging, but it never goes to landfill. Even when a crate or a container becomes unusable, it's lived its life. It gets, for some reason damaged in transit or something like that. 100% of it goes to be recycled. And actually for Tosca, all of our containers, we grind them up and use them in new Tosca containers. So it really is a very closed system for us.
Wow.
But through that process, not only do we take corrugated out of landfill, we also improve the protection of the commodities that are shipping. So we ship produce, eggs, meat, poultry, pork, all in our reusable containers, and it eliminates the waste that happens when it ships in a corrugated package because it's a rigid, reusable container. It eliminates a lot of the waste. It also is much more ergonomically friendly, and I'm a huge fan of that. All of the containers are rigid. They have handles. They work much better in an automated distribution environment because they are very standardized containers. So it eliminates labor waste. It eliminates food waste. It eliminates potentially injuries. It is in most cases it is a merchandisable shelf-ready container. So in the produce space, in the egg space, it can go from the truck straight to the shelf, ready to sell. Which means you don't have to rehandle things. You take box cutters out of the hands of the store employees. You take all the cardboard waste out of the equation as well. So
as someone that has almost lost 3 fingers working Winn-Dixie, stocking shelves with a box cutter, we appreciate that.
As a former retailer, right? I thank you too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great side benefit, but the real benefit is that instead of spending time stocking the shelves, now your store associates, which are hard to come by, can spend their time and their energy on more value-added services for the customer, right? For the eggs go straight into the cooler. The unique Tosca drop wall means that you can sell right out of the container, and then they move on to something else instead of hand stacking a dozen eggs at a time.
I've seen those in Kroger stores. One of the few things that I am allowed to buy in a grocery store is eggs, milk, and bread. That's pretty much all I'm allowed.
Everything else?
Yeah, which I'll probably be buying as this storm approaches Atlanta, right?
Yeah, well, shop early.
Yeah,
and not to get you to share any figures, but I know in some of our conversations and some of the events that you've spoken at, the breakage that you're protecting. I mean, bottom line savings because more of the product is hitting the shelves and is not being thrown out because it's being damaged along the way, right?
Yeah, and I will not quote any figures because our retail customers are very protective of that data. But I do know that particularly in eggs, where it's a much more quantifiable loss, across all retailers, something around 10% of eggs get damaged in transit. Some of them because the egg itself gets broken. In some cases, when an egg breaks, it then leaks and contaminates other things. It makes them unsaleable. And by the way, you said that's one of the few things that you're allowed to buy. But what's the first thing you do when you go buy eggs, right? Everybody opens it up and looks and makes sure that they're not broken.
Yep.
And when you find a broken egg, you put it back, which means that dozen eggs is not saleable anymore.
Yep.
So you don't just lose one; you lose.
You potentially lose that dozen or that
anything
whole
it leaks
case,
on.
right? If it leaks down. So if you think about that amount of waste and how many hundreds of millions of eggs get consumed, shell eggs in the United States now, and roughly 10% of them are being damaged in transit to retail, and our solution has cut that by significantly more than half.
Wow.
And again, retailers are a little protective of what that data is and how much their waste is today, but it is an enormous savings.
Moving the needle in a very meaningful way. All right, so your role.
Yeah, and for the biggest grocery retailers in the country, right? I mean, this is impacting a huge proportion of grocery retail.
Yeah, Tosca's not working with Luton Mercantile in Walton County.
Well, not yet, Scott, but we will if we need to.
He's a very tough nut to crack.
Well, the CEO, Brantley, runs a tight ship, so she does not like seeing salespeople. Breaks arms and legs. All right, so in your role, so as Chief Operations Officer, now you've been at Tosca for quite some time, and I think you've been leading up supply chain and operations for quite some time, but tell us about what you do now for Tosca.
Yeah, so coming up on 5 years with Tosca, and it's been a terrific 5 years. We've significantly grown the company. We've invested a lot of resources in new and better automation and new people as well. But yeah, so my team is responsible for primarily for the supply chain piece, because we are a reverse logistics company. When we ship our containers out, we need to make sure we get them back as well. So my team is responsible for the physical movement, and then the other half is responsible for the sanitation, the cleaning, the inspection, the repair of the containers to make sure that they are in good working order and food safe when they leave our facility. And then all the different components of that around making sure that our employees are safe doing their job. We have, I think, the most rigorous food safety program anywhere in the reusable packaging space, because we treat our containers as if they are direct food contact packaging. So our standards mean that when they come out the end of our wash line, you can eat off of the container.
Have you eaten off of a container? Seems like everything would fall through. I'm just kidding. Of course.
I have not, but I am assured that you can, and we've got really rigorous testing in place to make sure that when they leave our facility, they are very clean, very sanitary, disinfected, things like that. So that team, as well as the engineering team, where we look at not just internal automation, but also working with our customers to try and improve their supply chains, try and improve the flow of product through their distribution centers, how we can automate multiple package types, so reusable packaging would work as well on their lines as single-use, one-way corrugated packaging. So yeah, just a terrific team that's grown over the years, but really proud of the work that they've done.
Well, and you mentioned transportation a minute or two ago. I mean, that's a lot of management back and forth, and reverse logistics and returns, and then getting the inventory back into the system. We had the good fortune, and Chris Barnes, I think you were with us down a few years ago when we toured the Noonan, Georgia operation, right? And where you were, I think y'all hired a few veterans leading the operation down there at the time, at least. And just the clockwork and the cleanliness of the facility, and just the culture, which I know we're going to touch on in a minute. I mean, I think I've toured over 300 plants in my career, and there's such a huge difference when you're walking the floor and you see the employees that are unfortunately team members are disengaged or just not. They don't love what they do, and then you go to those sites where folks are really engaged, you're saying hello, they're making eye contact, and it's so night and day. And it seems like the latter is really defines the Tosca culture, right?
Oh, yes, right. He was on a roll there.
Yeah.
That's what stood out. And it's been I want to say 2 years ago, Chris, that we did that plant tour. Maybe 3. Time flies, but. It really stuck with us, especially all the different sites we've been in.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I would invite you back, because we're actually in the process. We just announced a few days ago the opening of our new Noonan facility. Try to say that
New Noonan.
3 times. New Noonan. Our new Noonan facility. We moved just on the other side of the highway to a brand new building, much more state of the art, similar equipment. We moved a lot of the pieces of automation over. But the one downside to the old facility is that it was in an old building, and we had configured it over the years. We had taken down demising walls and cut holes for conveyors to flow through. So the new space is bigger, brighter, much nicer space with parking lots and things like that we didn't have access to in the old space.
You're not sitting on your laurels.
You're not. You're not.
So
I think this solution. I think everybody can see it in their mind. Think about how many times you've seen a pallet or boxes, cardboard boxes in a retail store that are just being crushed, one under the weight of the other, and that sort of thing. And then that's the product that you're about to purchase, right? I think this should give consumers a lot more confidence in the product that they're buying as well. I think it protects a very delicate good, something you want to consume.
That and you don't have to check 5 egg cartons. Yeah. Because I don't know, whenever I buy eggs, especially, and we get our groceries delivered now, which is amazing. Talking about making life easier in the e-commerce age, to our front porch, which is just it boggles my mind that that's kind of where we are. But anyway, you're no longer having to check 6 different cartons and put them all back and dig into the crate to find the one where you got all 12 eggs. All right, so let's talk, but I want to stick with this culture piece because one of the and Chris, I want you to weigh in a second and speak to the company of the year and some of the things that we considered, or Apex Atlanta, one of our sponsors, considered around that recognition. But Tosca Top Workplace Award 2 years in a row now, which is pretty impressive. They've got some stringent requirements there. So, but beyond the awards, Mike, talk to some of the factors that makes Tosca and in general companies, what makes them employers of choice.
Yeah, so I think being an employer of choice is it's being recognized by your employees, and being an employer of choice means different things to different people. So the recognition, the award, means that we have connected our culture to our people. It doesn't mean that it's the right culture for everybody, right? And I think that's really important. I don't think we have the silver bullet to culture by any stretch, but I think we do for our team, and hopefully we continue to attract like-minded people. And I think the secret to our success is connecting the work that people do with the value that the company provides, right? So whether you're a supply chain planner where you're entering loads into the ERP system, or a financial analyst where you're working on pricing, or a salesperson out in front of the customer, you have to understand the work that you do and how that impacts eliminating food waste and eliminating inefficiencies in the supply chain and everything else that our mission and our vision stand for as a company. And I think, again, it means different things to different people, but if you can connect the individual work to the vision of the company, I think you create a winning culture.
Yeah, no doubt.
Agreed. Chris, Greg, any other comments on employer of choice, kind of what he's been sharing?
I just think, I think it's one of the first statements you made is, well, 2 of the first statements you made is, one, it's you're designated by your employees. That's big. I mean, I don't think you should gloss over that. You didn't, but I don't think we should, because that takes a lot of effort on your employees' part to participate in that, and and the other is just the fact that you are conscious of building a culture, and that you're conscious that it's not perfect, and that you identify that it is perfect for a type of person or someone with similar views. That's really important too. I mean, I think a lot of times when we talk philosophically about culture, we think, wow, that would be a great place to work, right? I think it's important to be realistic and practical about it and say, that's a great place to work if I share those views, right?
Yeah, and we joke a little bit about culture, right? I mean, having a ping pong table is not going to make you a great place to work.
Or pizza party.
Or pizza party.
It's going to get you a lot of votes, but it's not.
It will get you a few votes, but it won't make you necessarily a successful company.
Yeah.
There is a component to that. Being a great place to work, you have to know that there's going to be work to do, the next day, right? And we just we celebrated our 60th birthday this year. Really proud of that as well. So we've been being a great company to work for 60 years now. And I think there's a part of that as well, right? Folks have to understand not just the contribution, but also how they add value to the organization and how they connect to the bottom line. It's so important that part of the culture is also understanding that we're all here to do a job, right? We have to do work. Putting a ping pong table in is terrific to allow people to maybe disconnect for a few minutes,
blow off some steam.
Blow off steam, build some camaraderie, some friendly competition, but you still have to go back to work and do the job at some point, right? And we're at least on my team, especially the supply chain team, we work 24 hours a day because our customers never stop, the trucks never stop moving. Our folks do work a lot from home. They work a lot of off hours on the weekends when things are moving across the country on trucks. We're still watching it. Our sales service team, likewise, when a plant has an issue, that they're calling us and saying, "Hey, we need that truck here." We're running way more. We decided we are likely to get a call today from a customer that says, "Hey, forgot to mention we're going to work on Labor Day."
What's the Columbo, right? Oh, one more thing, right?
Yeah.
One more thing.
Mike, you were. This ties back to what you started off with from your first experience working when the guys just the clipboard and the guys that kind of talking about how. Just managers, part of their philosophy can either be managing processes or managing people. I think historically American management has been focused on managing processes and not so much on managing or developing people and employees. So from my perspective, it sounds like that first experience that you talked about had an impact on how you manage. I know you have a service background. So is that kind of your philosophy as a manager?
Well, it is. I would say my philosophy is there are three components to just being a good manager and a good leader, but it's the people, it's the process, and it's the technology that supports those things. I don't think you can focus exclusively on managing people without having a good process in place. To me, having a strong process allows for continuous improvement because then you can identify where there's opportunities. I think having strong process in place allows individuals to focus on best practices and innovation. And if you don't have some kind of a process in place, you end up running amok a little bit. And I think that's then people don't feel very connected because they're doing things differently than the person next to them. Whether that person next to them is a supply chain planner, a financial analyst, or a production worker on the line, you have to have that framework for them to operate in. And then I think you have to have the technology to support that. Technology that gives you the visibility to the data, the key metrics, in many cases the technology to eliminate work that is not value added by human hands. In some cases it's ergonomic, in some cases it's efficiency or speed, but you have to have the technology to support the great people as well.
Great point. All right, so changing gears a little bit here, all of us around the table brought our crystal balls in Tosca containers to the podcast today. And I'm going to pose this question to Mike first, but Chris and Greg, y'all feel free to weigh in with your bold predictions for 2020. But Mike, what are you when you think about next year, whether it's related to Tosca or just the business world, supply chain world in general, any big, bad, bold predictions?
I was hoping you were going to ask them first so I could just agree. I think the bold prediction for next year, right? The transportation market has been a mess the past couple of years. And the current state of affairs with the two things we talked about at the opening of the show, the tariffs that are going to go in place is going to shift the transportation market and the hurricane is going to shift the transportation market. Hurricanes consume a tremendous amount of trucking capacity because now all the trucks that were available are hauling generators and bottled water and plywood into the Southeast, which takes capacity out of the rest of the market. They also, they for better or for worse, they do chase the dollars. And if they can make a little bit more hauling, plywood into Florida instead of hauling, produce out of California or RPCs out of Noonan, Georgia, they're going to probably go chase that money where they can. So it does create pretty significant disruption in the supply chain space. I think secondly, going into next year, labor is going to continue to be an enormous challenge for the U.S. economy. We are near what's considered full employment, right? At like 3.5, 3.6% unemployment, which sort of means that everybody that wants a job has a job. There are still unemployed people out there. There are folks that have stopped looking that are not counted into that unemployment number. But it means that people have more choices now than they used to. Ironically, as we talk about it on Labor Day weekend, people have choices, and they can walk out the door from Tosca or from anybody else today, and probably by this afternoon, they can have a similar job, which speaks so much more to the culture of the company that they work for. We see people that will leave, go across the street because they put a big sign out in front of the factory that says, we'll pay 50 cents an hour more. They go, well, I need that 50 cents. I'm going to go. But they don't consider the culture. They don't consider the work climate. They may not consider the total compensation package, the benefits and the 401k and the tuition reimbursement and things like that.
The commute.
The commute.
In Atlanta, particularly.
But in my example, they're across the street, so it doesn't change much. But
Okay.
although in Atlanta, being across the street could add a half an hour to your commute. But anyway, I don't think people think about that enough. I think they see a couple more dollars and they go chase that because it's real money in your pocket. Yep. But they don't look at the value that the organization provides. So I think that's going to continue to be a challenge as companies look towards creating a better work environment for people. Ways to attract people that may not include just $1 an hour.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, that's those are some very accurate some crystal ball observations there. Projections for 2020, man. Any agreement, disagreement from our panel?
No, I think employment is a big issue. There's 7.6 million unfilled jobs right now and only 6.5 million job seekers. Right? I think people are seriously considering. Malcolm sent me that information.
I was going to ask if you made that up.
No, I knew this. I knew the 7.6. I did not know how many job seekers that was. There were, but I knew that there weren't enough. And that's presuming that there's a skills fit.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not an insubstantial problem. So I think it's possible that it's going to be mitigated. Which is my bold prediction for next year, is it's possible it's going to be mitigated by a short-term recession, hopefully short-term recession, probably in Q3 or Q4. So I'm on a number of boards of directors, you may know. And, there's a lot of money, investment money on the sidelines, and a lot of the companies that I work with are being encouraged to do those type of deals before Q3, Q4 of next year. So, it's that particular thing becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Things like tariffs, things like weather disruptions, things like tax and other conditions cause companies to pull back. When companies pull back, people pull back, and the costs that we talked about early in the show are going to inevitably are going to hit consumers. So I think consumers could hunker down. This last recession that we experienced in my lifetime, has the longest lingering effect that I have ever seen. And we suffered pretty substantial recessions in my lifetime. But this one has had the longest lasting effect. I mean, I think people have referred back to what they call the Great Recession ever since, and continue to today. So I think people are wary right now. And, to some extent, I think that along with lack of clarity in the marketplace is going to cause people and companies to pull back. And I think that's going to cause some sort of repercussions.
The Great Recession, right? It impacted how people consider home ownership forever,
right?
And with that change in home ownership versus short-term rental, you choose to invest differently in durable goods, right? If you're living in an apartment instead of owning your own home, you might buy less expensive furniture, and you certainly have less space to furnish. You don't need a lawnmower. There's nowhere to put the ping pong table in your apartment, right? Because you're utilizing community space.
That's why you need them at work.
That's why you have to go to work and find it. By the way, we don't have a ping pong table in our office, but we do have one in the common space. So so we kind of best of both worlds.
There you go.
Well, I'm prepared to make some big, bold bets for 2020. The sun's going to come up. The sun's going to set. Taxes.
How many times do you predict?
365 is what my Karnak envelope has got for me. But
it's not a leap year, right?
No.
That's right. The Braves will play baseball. The Falcons will play football. I'll tell you one thing I'm not looking forward to is a pretty nasty presidential election. And, that's politics aside, that's going to happen. And, I think the folks, American people, the workers, we need clarity and we need positivity. And as we all know with election years, we don't get a lot of those things. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think the transportation comments in particular, Mike, that you shared are interesting, especially in kind of the current context, right? But I want to switch gears now.
Wait.
Yeah.
I want Chris to swing for the fences. I want to hear what his prediction is. Come on, man. Tell us what you got.
My prediction, you're going to see a lot more micro warehousing going on in urban areas.
No doubt. We just talked to a company, Saltbox, who is doing kind of micro production facilities, and I went and visited them earlier this week, and I can see that being micro warehousing. And then there are all kinds of Simple Global and Stored who are doing what I would call edge distribution, micro warehousing or fractional warehousing, right? I agree with that, and that is a key to Amazon's capability to supplant UPS and FedEx and the Postal Service. They now do more of their own shipping than the Postal Service does.
Interesting.
By a good measure, and a lot of it is because of these delivery stations, their last mile stations that they put in place.
Yeah, the folks at Stored are good friends of ours. We've done a little bit of business together, but they shared office space with us when we connected the first time and realized they were a couple floors below us. So we've kind of grown up together a little bit. And it is that I would call it kind of the Uberification of warehousing and logistics services, right? Where you don't have to sign a long-term lease if you need 10,000 square feet and a forklift driver for a month or two. There are companies that provide that service, that amount of kind of dynamic, nimble logistics space.
And not just small companies,
yeah.
Right? I mean, one of the stories that Sean Henry from Stored told me was that I think it was Mobile, Alabama. Whirlpool wanted to position something like 12 refrigerators near a particular market because they had a significant demand there. So they were getting fractional warehouse space for that. So it's not, my initial thought was it's people selling tchotchkes on eBay or Amazon, right? But it's every manner of company out there.
I think Luton Mercantile in Walton County is a big customer.
Is that right?
Moving tchotchkes around.
Is that right?
I think so.
That's good.
Yeah.
Can you spell tchotchkes?
No.
Please don't try.
Sean Henry, though. So Sean Henry, who both of y'all.
CHOTSKY.
Hey, there you Sean Henry has he was supposed to make an appearance just a month or so ago because they've exploded here lately, right? Yep. They've had some investments. More and more companies have really seen the value of that flexible approach to warehousing. So we'll have to have him back on to give a kind of a state of the union on what's going on at Stored. All right, so let's switch gears over to ASCM. So obviously here in Atlanta, one of ASCM's key channel partners has been serving the market for almost 60 years. One of our sponsors, Apex Atlanta. And ASCM, which was launched officially October of last year, right? Mm-hmm. And there's been some pretty exciting things going on in that space. So you, Mike, have served on the ASCM board of directors for a couple of years now, and your role is changing. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so to be clear, I've only served on the ASCM board for a year now. Prior it was Apex, and I served on the Apex Supply Chain Council board and the Apex Foundation board, and I think we might have been the Apex L&D in there at some point as well. Yes. But yeah, I've been so privileged to work with Apex and now ASCM for going on 10 years now. Yeah. Served on the board for the past 5 or 6 years, I think, in officer positions and in board positions, and just love where we're going. I love the evolution from Apex to ASCM. You know, Apex primarily focused on the individual, focused on certification and education of the individual supply chain worker. Mm. And there's some, I need the fact checker, 240,000 some odd folks that have been certified by Apex, which is phenomenal, right?
Mostly by Chris Barnes.
Many by the man next to me. But when you think about how pervasive that is in the supply chain space, right? 240 thousand people working in the supply chain space that have been through that Apex body of knowledge is terrific. ASCM it is a very natural evolution, in my opinion, because Apex still exists, and the Apex certifications and the Apex body of knowledge focusing on the individual is still there. It's still strong. ASCM, though, allows the organization to also focus on corporations, right? So you're approaching learning kind of from both ends of the spectrum, right? The individual contributor, frontline supervisors, managers, and professionals, but then also focusing on corporate learning, which allows companies to focus on more holistic supply chain programs differently than you did just building that knowledge base from the bottom up.
So beyond what you've shared, what other values do you see that ASCM members or folks just, generally speaking, industry associations, what else do they bring to the table that helps advance the supply chain profession these days?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about shoe manufacturing at the beginning, I can't help but think about the newest ASCM certification, right? So it's a new program called ASCM Enterprise Certification, which focuses on sustainable and ethical supply chains. And it is an unbelievably deep dive into an organization to understand, are they sourcing, making, producing, and planning things in an ethical fashion. So I think that's going to be huge. That adds a tremendous amount of value because consumers now want to understand where their products were made and how they were made, and was the chicken in a cage or cage free and hand fed, or things like that. And that enterprise certification will help give people, I think, a higher degree of confidence that they're buying a product that was produced, manufactured, or sourced in a way that's consistent with their own ideals.
Yeah, we had Peter Bolstorff on Supply Chain Radio episode 132 to talk a lot about that new offering. Yep. Had a great time. He came to Atlanta, as a matter of fact. And
he planned that trip, by the way, when I was out of town, I noticed.
Well, really interesting interview, wasn't it, Chris? Here, actually at Sandia here at King Plow. But I think that they're really onto something with that. Of course, the circular economy, which is getting a lot more attention these days, meaningful attention, and that ASCM enterprise offering should be another successful rollout of a new product. So let's talk about ASCM 29. Chris, did you want to? Okay. ASCM 29. Hey, equal opportunities. I'm trying to read the tea leaves here. So ASCM 2019 in Las Vegas is coming up right around the corner, right? Roughly 2 weeks away. What are you going to be there this year?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
And anything you're most looking forward to?
Well, so this year I am not presenting anything. I've sort of been on a year, off a year, but presenting at the ASCM conferences is terrific. But this year there's just so much going on. But I always look forward to those opportunities. I mean, aside from just the community, right? Connecting with friends. There are folks that I see once a year at conference, and I consider them close friends. So really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to the learning sessions. I think you can get so much out of the time at conference. If you plan accordingly, you will have unbelievably full days. But you can learn things about leadership and management and sustainability, and then you can go across the hall and learn about the Internet of Things and the technology side. So such a diverse offering through the ASCM conference. So really looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And the networking at these things, to your point, always gets overlooked. I think a lot of the attention and the splash is always made about the keynotes, which there's some really neat keynotes. ASCM's got the first female F-14 Tomcat pilot. And if you remember, we touched on this in an earlier podcast. Top Gun, the original movie, those were F-14 Tomcats, right? It was like an iconic aircraft in the 70s and 80s, especially here in the States. And so that one, and also the CNN, we'll have to get Malcolm lay out the keynotes.
Yeah.
But my greater point being, the keynotes and the sessions and the topics and the learning opportunities, which are immense, get a lot of the buzz. But to your point, reconnecting with folks in your network that relationships are so critical to making end-to-end supply chain happen, right? Especially in the global era. And a huge opportunity to stay connected with your network at these events, such as ASCM 2019. Yep.
Yeah, not just the social aspect of it, but the best practice sharing and the resource discussions that we have. When I connect with folks there, it's not uncommon 6 months later to pick up the phone and say, hey, remember we were talking about this thing, or do you know somebody that does this, right? It does create just a terrific network of resources for folks to reach out and draw from.
Yep. So right on cue, the two keynotes for ASM 2019, Fareed Zakaria, CNN worldwide host. Everyone knows who that is. And Carrie Lorenz is the former lieutenant, first female F-14 Tomcat pilot, which is really cool. Looking forward to those. So how can folks, we've covered a lot of ground in the last hour or so, Mike. Really appreciate you taking time out. How can folks reach out to you to learn more about Tosca?
So the easiest way, toscaltd.com. It is I think a terrific website that shares a lot about what we do and how we do it. And really our marketing team has done just a fantastic job of telling our story and sharing with folks the value that we provide in the supply chain. On that website, there is an icon, a button to click to contact us now. If there are specific questions that you have or want to learn more about the company as a whole, click on that button. It'll go through our marketing group, and they then parse it out to the right people to make sure we get a quick answer to you.
Fantastic. Tosca,
just in the subject, just put "I like Mike." Right?
That's right. Be like Mike.
Yeah. We've never seen that before.
Yeah.
I'm going to send one right now, Mike.
Yeah. I'd appreciate it.
ToscaLTD.com. And, of course, you can get more information about ASCM at ascm.org. Appreciate all that you're doing beyond Tosca, what the contributions you're making to the supply chain profession and industry, Mike.
Well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You bet. So we spent the last hour with Mike Wasson, Chief Operations Officer with Tosca. Really enjoyed that conversation. We'll make sure to publish some of these links and resources in the show notes. But Chris and Greg, we are going to wrap up today on some upcoming events, right? We've got a pretty active schedule kicking off in about 2 or 3 weeks.
We're hitting the road.
We are. So,
or the air, whichever it is.
Right. So the two quick things before we cover some of these events coming up. 2 quick things to share with our audience. Number one, if there's anything today you heard that you can't find information on, you can shoot us a note to connect@supplychainnowradio.com, and we'll try to do what we can to get you any resources or ideas or answers to your questions. And then secondly, what we're about to cover, these events, you can find out all the links on our events tab at supplychainnowradio.com. Okay, so first up, September 12th and 13th, we're going to be in North Charleston, South Carolina, covering the 2019 AIAG SCAC Supply Chain and Quality Conference. Any guesses on those acronyms?
I've got it down now, just a month later. The Automotive Industry Action Group and the South Carolina Automotive Council. All right, again, led by future Governor of South Carolina, Amy Tinsley.
Who is the executive?
I am advocating because it is an election season.
She's gonna have a pack. We're gonna blink. She's gonna have a pack. No, but she's great people. She chairs the SCAC, the South Carolina Automotive Council. She is, I think, kicking things off
and has fielded some great guests for us.
Oh, we do.
Right? Bosch, Volvo. Of course, a lot of the OEMs that operate are going to be there. BMW, Mercedes. There's one more.
IBM is on the show with us.
IBM is going to be a guest for us. Yeah, that's right.
We're excited about that. And all sponsored by
the Effective Syndicate.
Yeah, good people over there.
Yep.
And then, so that's in a few weeks. It's going to be a little bit hot in North Charleston, South Carolina. And then we're going to be coming back to Atlanta October 9th for the Georgia Manufacturing Summit. About 1,000 people coming out for that. We're going to be leading Trends of Track and Supply Chain, a panel session. Jason Moss, who CEO of the GMA, has got 2 great keynotes from P&G and Kia. Kia cannot crank out the cars fast enough. That Telluride commercial at Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, it's a good-looking rig.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for Kia, but I was chatting with someone down there in West Point, and every Telluride coming off the line is already spoken for and is being sent to whoever ordered it. So good problems to have if you're making good cars down at West Point. But October 9th is the Georgia Manufacturing Summit. You can learn more at GeorgiaManufacturingAlliance.com. And then what's next up there, Greg?
Well, we're going to go help Austin keep it weird. 2019 EFT, 2019 Logistics CIO Forum in Austin, November 7th and 8th. So about 300 logistics executives meeting with people who want to sharing ideas with one another. So it's a great opportunity to rub elbows with some really sharp folks and some really forward-looking companies.
Yep, supply chain tech, logistics tech, freight tech, all that is huge topics down there November 7th and 8th, 2019, and we're going to be broadcasting live. Looking forward to that. Our next partnership with the great folks at EFT. And then we're going to hit the holidays. The schedule flips, and in February we've just kicked off a new partnership with the Reverse Logistics Association.
You should be there, Mike.
Yeah, y'all should be there.
Somebody from your
Tony.
Oh,
Shirota.
Yeah, Tony Shirota. Yeah.
Yep.
My Shirota.
Yep. He's going to be back on the show once a month with our Reverse Logistics series. We've got him back scheduled late September, but we're going to be broadcasting live at the RLA Conference and Expo in Vegas in February. And then, of course, Modex. We were talking Modex before the show this morning, one of the largest supply chain trade shows in the country. Modex is coming back to Atlanta in March. And not only are we going to broadcast live all 4 days of Modex, but they're hosting our 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, which we're very excited about. Chris was on the board of directors last year. Actually, Chris had the very difficult task of leading the judging process.
And I hope he does it again this year.
I do too. It made things easier on a lot of folks. No, we had probably over 40 nominations, right, last year in the first year. And we're really excited about partnering with Modex to do this at the Georgia World Congress Center on March 10th, I believe, that Tuesday of that week.
May have an enticing announcement in the very near future in terms of a keynote for the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards.
Working on a huge keynote. We got more work to do, but
just teasing it.
Yeah,
that's all you got to say.
I want to do a lot more than tease it.
I know you do. I know
we're not quite there yet, but
I still have to check my calendar.
Yeah. Well, we're not saying you're invited, Mike.
Yeah. I knew Mike would fit right in.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been good.
That's right.
But learn more about Modex, and it's free to attend. Modexshow.com, MODEX show.com. Okay, so huge thanks. We've I knew we'd enjoy this conversation. We've had Mike on the show previously. Really enjoy. I think it's really neat when you sit down with leaders from companies that get it, right? I mean, and we led off, Mike, with your passionate statements around the folks that make it happen in supply chain, right? The people that are on the floor, that are driving, moving, really
that's
working. The Gemba. Yeah. And it was a great note to begin with, and it's a great note to finish with. So thank you for what you do, Mike Wasson, COO at Tosca. Big thanks to Greg White and Chris Barnes. Round of applause.
Whichever one of us is which.
But great conversation. Be sure to check out other upcoming events and replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. As we mentioned, you can shoot us a note to connect@supplychainnowradio.com if we can help in any way. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, all the other leading sites where podcasts can be found. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now Radio team, Scott Luton here, wishing you a wonderful weekend ahead, and we'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.